My name is Larry. I am 108 years old, and what I'm about to tell you comes from the stories that were passed down carefully from men who were there and from records most people never take the time to read. I am here to tell you the truth about Erwin Rommel, the version that rarely makes it into the clean, heroic summaries. People remember the nickname, Desert Fox. People remember the daring escapes in the sand. And people forget how his story ended. Because it ended inside Germany, not on a battlefield. On October 14th, 1944, two generals came to his home with a choice from Hitler: poison quietly or a public trial that would destroy his family. Rommel picked the capsule. Now you'll see how a man becomes a legend and how legends get cornered. Erwin Rommel liked mechanics, and he joined the army in 1910 because Germany in that era shaped young men that way. World War I is where his reputation turned real. In October of 1917, at Caporetto on the Italian front, Rommel led bold, fast attacks that captured positions and thousands of prisoners. And it earned him the Pour le Mérite, the Blue Max, Germany's top award for valor. That moment mattered a lot because it built his identity: speed, surprise, forward motion, and a willingness to act while others hesitated. But you will know why those instincts became his signature weapon. I remember in 1937, Rommel had turned his frontline experience into a book, Infantry Attacks. And that book is one reason military schools still say his name. It wasn't poetry. It was a manual of movement, how to exploit confusion, how to break an opponent's rhythm, how to win with timing instead of brute force. That thinking fit perfectly with the new German doctrine of fast armored warfare. And when the next war began, Rommel did not remain a quiet theorist. He demanded a combat command. Now, you'll see the moment the world started watching him like a headline. In 1940, Rommel took command of the 7th Panzer Division for the invasion of France, and his unit got a nickname that tells you everything: the Ghost Division. He moved so quickly that even German commands struggled to track him, and Allied forces struggled harder. His reputation exploded because speed looks like genius when the opponent cannot breathe. Hitler loved that kind of success, and the propaganda machine loved Rommel's image. A bold commander at the front, confident, aggressive, and camera-ready. The result was dangerous because the more famous he became, the more political his survival became. Now you'll see where the legend turned global and where the sand began to swallow the truth. Been in North Africa in 1941 gave Rommel the perfect stage: wide distances, fast maneuvers, and fights decided by movement. He was sent to Libya to stabilize Italy's failing campaign, and instead he pushed forward, forcing the British to react again and again. That is where Desert Fox stuck, and even enemies started respecting him. There is a reason Rommel remains unusual in World War II history. Allied officers often praised him openly, and that is rare for a man fighting under Hitler's flag. Now here this may be complicated, but North Africa produced the phrase, war without hate. And Rommel's forces were often described as more conventional, than the ideological slaughter on the Eastern Front. Some accounts say he resisted illegal orders involving prisoners, and his reputation for professionalism grew. Other historians point out that crime still occurred in the theater, and that serving the regime still tied him to a wider system of brutality, even when direct personal responsibility is hard to prove in every case. That tension is the real Rommel debate: tactical brilliance, personal reputation, and the fact he fought for Nazi Germany. The middle of Rommel's story is famous, and the ending is what many not understand. The desert also exposed his biggest weakness: logistics. Rommel could outmaneuver almost anyone, and he could not conjure fuel from thin air. Supply ships across the Mediterranean were attacked, shortages piled up, and the campaign became a math problem. I remember in October 1942, at El Alamein, Montgomery stopped him, and by May 1943, Axis forces in North Africa surrendered. Rommel's aura survived, and the record became clear. Tactics can win battles, and supply lines decide wars. Now I tell you how Rommel was moved from the desert to the place where the war would snap his career in half. In 1944, Rommel was tasked with strengthening the Atlantic Wall in France because everyone knew an invasion was coming. He pushed for tanks closer to the beaches because he believed the first hours would decide everything and delays would be fatal. German command argued, Hitler compromised, and the defense ended up split, which meant it was weaker everywhere. I know on June 6, 1944, the Allies landed in Normandy. Rommel was away, at home, and the timing would haunt him. He returned to a front collapsing under air power and overwhelming numbers. And on July 17, 1944, his car was attacked from the air, crashing and leaving him badly injured. Now you'll understand why that injury may have saved him for a moment and doomed him right after. 3 days after that crash came July, the assassination attempt on Hitler. The bomb exploded, Hitler survived, and the regime's response was savage. Investigators pulled names, interrogations, and Rommel's name surfaced. His exact level of involvement is debated to this day, and what mattered inside the Third Reich was not courtroom certainty, it was suspicion. Rommel was too famous to drag through the People's Court without consequences, and Hitler's solution was quiet removal. Now you'll see the moment the legend met the regime he helped serve. On the morning of October 14, 1944, 2 generals arrived at Rommel's home in Herlingen, Wilhelm Burgdorf and Ernst Maisel, carrying Hitler's ultimatum. The choice was brutal and direct. A public trial meant certain execution, and it meant punishment for his wife and his son. The other option was suicide, and the state would stage the story. Death from injuries, a funeral with honors, a pension, and safety for his family. The house was surrounded, and negotiation was not part of the visit. Rommel spoke to his family, put on his uniform, stepped into the car, and took the cyanide capsule. Within minutes, it was done. The regime announced the lie, and most of Germany repeated it. Rommel received a state funeral. The public story said he died from earlier wounds. His family held their expressions in place. because survival required silence. After the war, the truth came out, and Rommel became something useful to many people, an acceptable German hero, a soldier who could be separated from the regime in public memory. That myth helped West Germany rebuild an identity, and it helped former officers frame the Wehrmacht as cleaner than it was. Later scholarship has pushed back, harder questions, sharper archives, and more attention to what people ignored for decades. Here is the truth I leave you with. Rommel was a gifted commander, and he was also a man who climbed inside a criminal system and benefited from it until that system turned on him. His legacy stays debated because it sits right on the fault line between military admiration and moral responsibility. If you came here expecting a simple hero story, you did not get one, because history rarely gives those away. If you want more stories where the truth gets stripped down to the record, I may show up here again. I see you in the next one.